Hey everybody. So first of all, thank you so much for all your constructive criticism about the audio quality of the previous video and prior videos. I really love getting that kind of feedback. Anyway, I am going to be more diligent about making sure the audio level is 100% sufficient. So, in a way, actually, yes, a sincere thank you for the feedback, even though I do find it a little bit annoying. Anyway, today there was an interview published between Glenn Greenwald of The Intercept and Tulsi Gabbard. And this interview was conducted last week in Washington, D.C. And it's another rarity for Tulsi because mostly when she's interviewed by people in the, quote, media, and to describe Glenn Greenwald as in the media in a traditional sense would be a stretch. But regardless, most of her high-profile media interviews have been very aggressively antagonistic, and there's nothing wrong with being antagonistic toward a political figure if you're trying to actually hold them to account on principle grounds. But for the most part, all her interviews have been very sleazily conducted. They've all been about trying to nail her down on stupid, flaws that she supposedly has, whether it's how, the Russians are backing her on social media. This is what she was badgered about on Morning Joe, whether she's the best friend of Assad, which is what she was badgered about on The View. The list goes on. So that's not what Greenwald was doing. He was actually trying to elucidate her views, and he did so in about 30 minutes. It was intended to be 45 minutes to an hour, but she had a vote, and there was she had to fly back to Hawaii for National Guard service. So her having to go back and forth between Hawaii creates a lot of scheduling problems, and understandably so given the distance it takes to travel. Anyway, the 30 minutes was definitely well worth your time. They discussed all aspects of foreign policy, even a little bit of domestic policy. But one thing I wanted to highlight here is that Greenwald brought up the Mueller report, and her answer to that question is especially relevant this week when Democrats are in yet another frenzy over ancillary aspects of the Mueller report. Now, holding Bill Barr in contempt, definitely moving toward an impeachment scenario of Trump. So her having come out and said what she said is really significant because it means she's going to be just exiled and ostracized from aspects of the Democratic Party who find what she said as unconscionable. And I'm just going to quote to you what she said. It's really straightforward. It ought not to be controversial in the slightest. But saying this means that you're basically thrown out of the Democratic Party, at least according to many elected officials and pundits and so forth. Now, she does have some support in the Democratic Party, so it's not uniform. But her saying this is just unconscionable per the lights of most of them. Here's what she said. Quote, "The Mueller report made clear that there was no evidence of collusion." Wow, bombshell. Any reasonable person should have read the Mueller report and concluded the exact same thing, but we don't live in a reasonable era. And so Democrats have been flipping out, proclaiming exactly the opposite since the Mueller report was issued. And there's whining that, Bill Barr covered it up. He's not turning over the full report, even though turning over the full report in the manner that they demand would actually be illegal. It would violate federal statutes. There's actually a great piece that I'll link to in the description box by Jonathan Turley, the George Washington University law professor, that goes through just the idiotic illogic that Democrats have used to underlie their citation of Bill Barr for contempt. Anyway, Tulsi coming out and saying that, it's going to really make a lot of people angry because they're going to say that, oh, you're giving credence to Trump. You're helping the Republicans. No, she's just reflecting reality. But reflecting reality is a grave offense for these people. And I really think that this week, and there have been so many of these types of weeks, but especially for this week, Tulsi Gabbard's presence on the national scene, so to say, is especially valuable because she projects an air of calmness, of rationality, of somewhat impartial examination of the issues at hand. And that just flies totally in the face of most of her colleagues. In my interview with her that was published in March on this YouTube channel, which you can go watch if you haven't, or listen to rather, or you can download via podcast, she told me about having expressed reservations and concerns to her Democratic colleagues in the House when they have her, or when they request that she sign on to letters or resolutions, condemning Russia for carrying out a supposed attack on America, or threatening existentially, the fiber of the American Republic, that ridiculous rhetoric that Democrats are now, obsessed with and can't move beyond or want to press even further into derangement. So this idea of a constitutional crisis, which Gerald Nadler, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, proclaimed yesterday, and which has been echoed across the entire media and Democrats, it's just standard rhetoric for them. That makes no sense. You don't want to know what a real constitutional crisis was in American history? It was when the southern states seceded from the Union in 1961, which was the precursor to the Civil War. That was a genuine constitutional crisis because it meant that those states were no longer affirming no longer abiding by the Constitution. I mean, that's a constitutional crisis, okay? Not Bill Barr temporarily withholding some documents from Gerald Nadler, some of which would have been illegal for him to provide. So that's not a constitutional crisis. And if you're using that word, or that term, you're just a hyperbolic moron, okay? And Tulsi Gabbard is not into hyperbole. She's not into joining on the bandwagon of this ridiculous hyperbolic nonsense. And that's reflected in the statement that she gave to Greenwald. I actually do think that there's a segment of her support which supports her on the basis of her rational take on elements of Trump Russia. So there's actually some political utility in saying what she says on this subject. And I think she's going to continue saying more or less the same thing, especially in the face of just these endless reinventions of the Trump-Russia conspiracy. So, anyway, watch the full video. I'll link to it in the description box, and I'll leave it there for now. Have a good day.